Good morning, Louisville, and welcome to the third installment of the Who's Louisville live stream web show. We're joined this morning by Anthony Smith, who's the Director of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods for the City of Louisville. That's a mouthful to say.
It is a mouthful.
Good morning, Anthony.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So these next 3 or 4 weeks, we're going to be continuing the exploration we started a couple weeks ago. We're talking to people from all around Louisville who are really important to our city and are doing really interesting things. These Who's Louisville broadcasts will be investigating the identity of the city of Louisville throughout our run here at Zephyr Gallery at 610 East Market through March 27th. So, Anthony, the name of the show is called Who is Louisville? So who is Louisville right now?
I mean, Louisville has always been a mix of everybody, and I think that's part of the thing that we're really working on, and people are working hard to do, is really start bridging all of those gaps. I think Louisville's been a city of neighborhoods forever, and people stayed in their neighborhood and did their thing, but I think there's so many interesting things happening that folks are crossing boundaries and crossing lines. So I think Louisville is becoming a mix of just a lot of different people doing a lot of different things, and I think people are finally at a place where they're experimenting in different neighborhoods, going to the different things that are happening, eating at new restaurants, going to new places. So I just think I think it's open. I think it's really wide open to who Louisville can really be, and I think everybody, there's still some inequities that we got to work on, but I think there's a lot of possibility for a lot of folks if they're willing to take those chances.
So you talk about crossing boundaries, going over into different neighborhoods. I think that that's a good metaphor for a lot of stuff that's even happening at the national level these days. We're having different conversations maybe than we did 5 or 10 years ago.
Absolutely. Just
so,
a year ago. Right?
Yeah, a year ago for sure. So what is one thing or two things that you've seen at the national level, a conversation that's going on, or just even something interesting that you maybe have read or heard that you think Louisville could gain inspiration from or learn from?
Oh, wow. There's a number of things that, I think Louisville is gaining and could gain more inspiration from. One of the things that I'm really excited about is actually My Brother's Keepers, President Obama's initiative really around working with boys of color, really figuring out how do we get better outcomes for them. And, we just was in D.C. last week and really looking at that as a nation, and there was like 37 cities represented, 13 states, and there's a lot of people having a conversation around what's going on with our boys of color when you look at black and brown boys, and even if you think about those who are on the reservation, and then you think about the immigrants coming over and the folks who are trying to come to Louisville, new Americans. I mean, it's a hard place for young men of color to really try to figure it out.
Sure.
So I think, we could do better here. I think Louisville can always do better when it comes to that. When you look at our jails, when you look at the juvenile detention center, when you look at what's happening in the JCPS, boys of colors are always at the bottom of the list. And we've got to change that if we really want to be the city that we want to be. So I think there's some folks, we were just, like I said, in D.C., Chicago's got a program called Becoming a Man, where this young man was talking about all the different things that are taking place for him there and how he feels empowered and he's doing better because of this program. So that's one of those national programs that a lot of people are paying attention to and looking at. But I really do think the conversation around what's taking place around our boys and men of color, especially black men and black boys, is an interesting conversation that we all need to be paying attention to.
That's great. I mean, on this show, we've made a commitment to ourselves to always say the uncomfortable things. And the one thing that I've always wondered is, I'm a 45-year-old white guy. And so who's from Appalachia. So, but I'm interested in doing what I can do to help and plugging in. So how do other people who may come from the background and life experience that I've come from participate and support these kinds of initiatives?
I think it's really just coming in, being who you are, being authentic, being curious, being okay with making some mistakes along the way, but also staying true to it. Because I think, what happens is a lot of folks feel like they can't come in because they can't relate. But it really isn't that you just got to be open to the possibility of the difference. You got to understand there is a difference. You got to understand that people are creative, resourceful, and whole. One of the things I learned from my old job at NC3, because you can't come in and save people. You can't come in and make it better. You can come in and be a part of making it better. So what role do I play when I come in, right? Understanding where your role is and being a part of it. But then also coming in and listening a whole lot. I think a lot of people come in and not listen to what's going on already, what's taking place already. So getting a feel for what's happening and then figuring out where you fit in. So I think there's a role for everybody. We just released this new campaign out of my office called the One Love Louisville campaign, and it really is around everybody has a role to play to make a difference, right? We're looking at how do we reduce violent deaths. And a lot of people can say it doesn't faze me, right? When you think about homicides, most of our homicides are African-American males between age of 18 and 34. So a lot of folks can say that would not impact my life, but it does impact your life in the long run, because anytime we lose a life in Louisville, we lose that possibility. We lose what could have been. So it's an impact on all of us. So I just think, paying attention, listening, and just coming in and being authentically who you are and not trying to change for the situation, but just coming in and offering what you have.
I saw a quote the other day. I may not get it exactly right, but it said, to not know what has come before you is to be forever a child.
Absolutely.
And that really stuck with me when I read that. What are you seeing or hearing at a national or even state level that you think is potentially a really beneficial moment that we should pay more attention to in Louisville maybe than we are?
I think so. There's a number of things, but I want to talk a little. Let's talk a little bit about House Bill 70. That's at Frankfurt, right? It's been one of those things that's been on the books. People have been advocating forever. It really is around voter restoration.
Right.
Those who have served their time, who have done all that they were supposed to do from the crime that they committed, cannot automatically get their voting rights back. And that's one of the things that Kentucky's like 3 or 4 states that did not automatically give you voting rights back. People have been asking for that. People have been advocating for that, and people have been pushing for that for at least the last 8 or 9 years, or even more that I know of. And that's one of those things that might seem small, but it's big for somebody who wants to be re-engaged in the community. So if we can have people paying attention to that and people thinking about that and just thinking about how do you help people return home from being, after they've served their time in prison completely. It's hard for folks to find jobs. We talk about ban the box, which is a national movement. Metro government actually bans the box on their thing. And it's like, how do you do that more consistently? How do you give people a second chance? How do you really let them re-enter after they've served their time? We can't be punitive. We can't keep punishing them for the same crime once they've done what they're supposed to do. So I think, one, paying attention to House Bill 70, really going to Frankfurt. I think they're going up on the 26th of February for the House Bill 70 day. You can get with Kentuckians for the Commonwealth and folks like that who are really going up, KFTC, advocating for it. But I think that's one thing. If we can get people to rally behind that, and then I think that would have domino effect on helping people not recidivize, and then also helping them re-engage in the community.
Sure. KFTC is doing some amazing work around that particular issue. And if someone's interested in this particular issue, what's the best place for them to connect with to start getting involved with it?
I would think Alicia Hurl over at KFTC. Check them out on their website. They're helping co-sponsor this day. I think the folks over at ACLU has been a big part of this as well. And then there's just a lot of grassroots movement behind it. And I think the council, when Councilwoman Scott was there, they pushed a resolution where all of the council and Mayor Fisher signed on, asking folks in Frankfurt to sign it as well. So I think you can call your local, you can call your state reps, you can find out who your state reps and call them or write them. But I think starting with KFTC or ACLU would probably be the best bet.
That's great. And I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, it's KFTC.org.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you think that folks in Louisville can learn from the experience that you've had as director of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods? Because you were the first director of Safe and Healthy.
New office,
It's what, 2 years old
2
now?
2 years in March.
2 years in March. Time flies.
Time goes by quick.
Yes, it does. What is some of the, what's one or two of the biggest lessons that you didn't anticipate, maybe going into this role, that you've learned from in the work, and how can the rest of Louisville maybe learn from some of those same experiences?
One, I think, people are more willing to help than we really believe they are. Because when I came, my first day on the job, there were a number of emails from people all over Louisville saying, how can I be helpful? There were a number of letters from people all over Louisville saying, how can we be helpful? And it's just been a consistent call. I think people have always said, what can we do better? We want to do better, right? So one, I think we just got to understand that even though at times it doesn't feel like everybody's engaged, people are more engaged than we really give them credit for. Because I walked in thinking, I would only get calls from certain points of the city because that people thought they were more impacted by it. But like I said, there was emails from folks far east, far south, far west saying, how can I be helpful? Even from Indiana saying, we know this is a big job. How can we be helpful? So I think that's one thing we can all learn is that, there is help around. You just got to reach out and accept it. And it's going to come from different places. It's not going to come from all your likely suspects or likely folks at times. But then I think just on the national level, I think people got to understand that when you look at Louisville, and I know, violence is real personal. It happens to me and it happens to my family, but Louisville is actually one of as like the fourth safest city when you compare us to our sister city and our sizes. And we were fifth last year, we're fourth this year, and that's based on FBI data and crime and stuff like that. So Louisville has violence, and there's, we're looking at how we solve it and how we get to an issue where it starts really ticking down. But I just think people got to understand that it's not as dangerous as it could feel at times, but it also depends on who it's happening to and how close it's happening to you, right? So if it's happening close to me, then it's going to feel like I'm in a dangerous city, right? So, but I just think people can understand, I think the mayor talks about compassion, and I don't think people think it's hokey, but we are a compassionate city. People care, and it might not feel like it consistently, but I think people care more than we give them credit for. And I think, one of the things that, being in this role, it allows me, and my other role in NC3 allowed me to see all of the city. And we've got a beautiful city and a lot of different things that I just don't think people take advantage of. So, for me, being able to sit in all the different rooms, go to all the different places, I just want people to take more advantage of our city and really get out and, be a tourist in your own city kind of thing.
What is the definition of compassion?
For me, it really is. It's just, sometimes putting others before yourself. Understanding that you've got to think about, the whole and not just yourself. But I think you also got to be compassionate to yourself, right? Because I think a lot of times it's easier for us to be compassionate to others and feel for others and give others a little bit more grace than we give ourselves. So I think, we've got to be able to figure out how do we be compassionate, not beat ourselves up, not be harsh on ourselves, not beat us up because of our inequities that we have in ourselves, and just really how do you play all of that out. So I think it really is taking time to get to know yourself and others, and just really giving people grace, treating people as creative, resourceful, and whole, and just allowing people to be who they are and loving them anyway.
You've said a couple times, and it comes from NC3.
Absolutely.
Creative, resourceful, and whole. That's a phrase that from the very first time I ever heard it has stuck with me.
Absolutely.
I only needed to hear it once for it to stick with me. Can you talk a little bit, for those who may not be familiar with NC3, the work they did, and that phrase, can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so, NC3, Dana Jackson, Jenny Jean, Ebony O'Ray, Jane Walsh, there's a lot of folks that you can go through, was a grassroots organization that did organizing, and we organized based on relationship building, right? We didn't organize around issues. We organized around creating relationships with the individuals and the communities that they lived in, and really saying to folks who live in those neighborhoods, you have all the tools you need. Let's just figure out how we bring them together, right? So it was really around empowering folks to understand that they had what they needed. They were creative, resourceful, and whole. They got to where they were before we showed up, and they were going to get wherever else they needed to be before if we didn't show up. But it was really around how do you build this collective movement around folks who care about each other in a way that whether I agree with you 100% or not, I'm still going to love you and give you grace and help you figure out the world. So for us, NC3 was really around building this network. We went from a network of 350 people to a network when it sunsetted to about 5,000 people who lived and cared about, worked in most of West Louisville neighborhoods. We touched all of Louisville, but we were focused on West Louisville neighborhoods and really trying to say to folks, one, pay attention to the assets in the community, right? These communities are creative, resourceful, and whole. They've been doing this for a long time. There's been generations of people who have come from, lived in, and have made it out, or who have made it and stayed in those neighborhoods. So we don't need no saviors to come in and do any of the work. It really is around empowering people who live in those neighborhoods, and encouraging them, giving them tools and skills that they need to create their best outcomes possible. So I think, when you think about creative, resourceful, and whole, for me, one day it finally hit me, you kept saying everybody's creative, resourceful, and whole, everybody. But you also got to look at yourself and say, I'm creative, resourceful, and whole, right? So you got to go back, because if you don't see yourself as creative, resourceful, and whole, you can't treat everybody else that way fully, right? So, but NC3 was just this model, and you see a lot of people who have come from it who are still a part of it. Think about Delquan Dorsey, who's at the governor's office right now. He's a director for executive director for the Minority Empowerment, and he's this NC3 person who It's taking that creative, resourceful, and whole, this relationship building community, and building bridges, right? One of the things NC3 did best was build bridges between those who have perceived power and those who don't, and made people sit at the same table and say, let's figure this out together, right? Nobody's voice is bigger than anybody else's. Everybody's got the same voice, but we need you all at the same table, right? You have different resources than they have, but resources are resources. So it was really just, and it still goes on to this day, but it was just one of those things that, you know, we really pushed hard on figuring out how to let the communities lead the work, and we just supported the work in the best way we could.
In looking at the landscape of Kentucky and the landscape of Louisville these days, I'm seeing a lot of, it goes back, you know, to the House Bill 7 that we were talking about. There seems to be a new conversation around civil rights of across the board, of what that means. And I know my own personal view is that anytime that rights are denied to one person, they're denied to all of us.
Absolutely.
That's how I was raised, and that's what I still believe. What are you seeing as some of the more productive conversations we could be having around civil rights that we're not?
You know, I think Louisville is, and I think it's starting in Louisville, and Louisville's pushing it farther out, because I think, you know, when you think about Kentucky's a very conservative state as a whole, right? And I think, you know, when you start talking about civil rights and you start talking about differences and you start talking about, you know, not just race, but also gender and sexual orientation and all of that, Kentucky gets kind of closed up, right? The farther you go out from Louisville and places like that. So I think, you know, I think Louisville is having the tough conversations, right? And I think Louisville's pushing it on the state level. And I think people are actually learning from Louisville on how this stuff is getting done. You know, I think, you know, we have continually pushed the conversation since the Trayvon Martin, since the Mike Brown and all of that stuff. I think we've got a group of young folks who are really pushing that conversation, who are going to be pushing it harder and having deeper conversations. You know, I think, you know, it goes back to my earlier statement. I do believe we've got to have the hard conversation around who's not faring well in our community, why aren't they, and what can we do differently, right? And I think it goes back to, you know, for me, it's still, race is a hard conversation for us to have, but it's one that the mayor is willing to have. I think there's other people. We just had the 100 Possible Quorum who spent about a year having this hard conversation. They just released a report. I don't know if anybody, you know, how many people have read it and looked at their recommendation, but it really is saying, how do we look at equity a little bit different? And, you know, one of the first things in the meetings that we had with the mayor when we first started this work was he wanted to know who it was happening to when you talk about homicides. And if you know who it's happening to, then let's claim it and name it, and then we can get people rallying around that. So if we're losing more black men to homicide, then let's have that conversation. When you look at suicides and overdose, we're losing more white men to that, right? And that's happening in Southwest and Southeast. So we want to really start looking at and just be real clear. Those who are hurting, why can't we just say it and figure it out instead of trying to make it and be politically correct around it and make it a bigger conversation than what it needs to be, right? If our young black men are doing bad, let's figure that out. If our young black girls are doing bad, figure that out. Young white women, whoever, let's figure it out and let's make it happen. And let's not hold ourselves back because we're supposed to be so equitable when it's that conversation, right? Because I think, you know, focusing in on the population when they're doing bad makes it more equitable. Even when you think about the homeless, I think the mayor and the team just did the veterans. You know, we won't have a homeless veteran because of some of the funding and some of the work that they've been doing. But that doesn't mean we don't have other homeless people, right? Where do we care? How do we really do our work around that? We need more detox beds, right? We're not talking about drugs and
huge problem.
Huge problem. When you think about heroin and you think about what's going on.
Everything I hear on that, it's growing, rapidly growing again.
And it's hitting us in East, South, and West. Right? But we're not having the conversation. We're not putting more funds on the table. We're not advocating for the things that we need. You know, Mark Bowden, who runs the jail, has the largest detox in the city. Right? But he can't get folks all the way through treatment because by the time he gets them there, then it's time for him to go because of the crowding and because of the way just the sentences, right? So, I mean, you got all of these things taking place, but then they end up back in because they never completed their detox and they didn't get treatment. So, therefore, they got to get it fixed so they go steal and rob and, you know, end back up in jail. So, I mean, it's just all kind of things that, you know, I think we're ready to have the conversation on, but then we got to be also ready to fund it to the capacity that it needs to be funded. And that can't just be through city money. It's got to be through collaborations with our private partners, with our foundations, to really say, if we want Louisville to be better, we got to do these things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you talked about their treatment. I think the Healing Place popped to mind.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing really amazing work, and that's a great example of public-private partnerships that is stepping in
Absolutely.
to address an identified need without being asked to do it.
Right. Right.
And that's just one example of a lot of folks, I think, around
Absolutely.
the city of Louisville.
And they're building more beds. They should have more beds opening soon, right? But it's the getting them open part of it, right? So, but Healing Place. I think, you think about my father's house. Mike White runs a place down on Jefferson Street called My Father's House. It works with men in recovery, alcohol, and there's some amazing stuff happening. But how do we scale it?
Yeah.
Right. How do we get it to the place where we can take care of all folks? So
you're talking about scale. That's the same question you hear a lot of entrepreneurs around. Everybody's talking about scale, but I think it's an interesting paradigm because we are an entrepreneurial city. There's a lot of business, entrepreneurship, startup activity in Louisville. And so I think maybe there's some things that we could learn from each other about how to scale up things. Because it gets into this conversation about, are we all sitting around the same table? And I think we still have a lot of work to be done to that because the business crowd sees business as its own thing. The social justice crowd, I think, a lot sometimes sees that as their thing. And so we have all of these ecosystems that are sitting beside each other. And crossing over is not always an easy thing to do. And I think even for those first ones that tend to cross over into these different areas, take a lot of heat. but that's okay because Louisville has a lot of great people who've been doing that for years. They're crossing over, going back to Ann Braden.
Absolutely.
So we have a really unique opportunity, I think, in Louisville to carve out a place in the mindset of at least the middle part of the country as a place who is doing things a little bit differently than any place else. And I think it's a combination of all these things that we're doing that is totally unique to us. There are conversations that are happening in other places. There are issues that occur in other places, but we're doing something different here. And, I credit Mayor Fisher and his leadership for a lot of that. But even more than that, I credit a lot of people that I know and I run into every day on the ground who are doing it. And we need more of those.
Absolutely.
Let's morph into a conversation about the arts because we are a creative chamber of commerce. We are very much engaged in, as you know, a lot of our systemic issues in Louisville. But at the end of the day, we're an arts organization that is using arts-related strategies to participate in and help to address those in whatever way we can. What is the relationship, from your own point of view, between the arts and some of the issues that you deal with as Director of Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods?
It's at the core, right? Arts plays a huge role, right? I think so. There's a couple of things that that tells me art is important to the work that I do, right? One, we were working with a group of kids at the Baxter Community Center, right? And we went in and we did a makerspace with them, right? It was really say, you've got this community center, you can't change the structural, but you can move things around and you can make it different. You can use spaces different.
Was that Kelby Price?
Kelby Price was with us. Elizabeth Stent Alvey was there. And we just had a bunch of people who came and said, can we do something different? And we did it over winter break a couple years ago. So we were talking to the kids. We went in and said, okay, this are the parameters. You got to use recycled goods, find stuff that's in your building, and you've got to make a model of your building, identifying how you would use all the rooms in your place, right? So we started asking questions. And there was this 11-year-old kid. I think he was about either between 9 and 11 years old kid. And he said he needed an art space. He needed an art space that was away from everything else because when he found himself getting angry and upset, that was his way to calm down. That was his way to go find his peace and find his sight, right? So this young man was telling us that, I need a space where I can go and be, and I need art space, and I need to be creative because that helps me calm down. It helps me think through things. It helps me move on to the next thing. So that way I don't get in fights. I don't get kicked out of the center because I'm mad and stuff like that. So you see that taking a role. And we want to be able to create those spaces for young people. When they identify, they tell you what they need, they tell you what they want. We've got to listen. Then also, you know, you guys have been working a whole lot with Lance Newman. One of the things Lance did for us is he went to a convening with us. It was a Cities United convening, which is this big national movement around how can mayors really work to reduce violence in their communities, right? And one of the things we saw when we were there was a bunch of young people doing a bunch of cool stuff, and there was a bunch of poets. And they were talking about how violence impacts their lives and how poetry helps them not become a part of that, right? So Lance came back and, you know, we debriefed with the mayor, and he was saying to the mayor he wants to create something like that, right? So I think, you know, Spread Love Lou came out of that 4-day event where everybody was trying to bring together. And so you see a bunch of people coming around using their artistic, their creative skills to really, one, get them out of that lifestyle, but then also to talk about it in a way that's not threatening, in a way that people can get it and hear it. So I see it playing a huge role. You know, I think, you know, you've had young people who've done documentaries around violence. Lavelle White, you know, who had, you know, on his second one, on his actually third or fourth documentary right now, but his second one on Smoketown. If you ever look at his Young Black Voter video, I mean, it talks about so many different social ills and so many things that are going on. But the cool thing about it is it shows how Lavelle maneuvers through it and how he figures out the world based on his mentors and stuff like that. So I think it plays a big role. I think, you know, even when you just look at asking people to take pictures and look at things, I just think there's so many ways that people can, one, show the impact of violence, but then also, two, use art and creativity as a way to get them out of that life.
Do you know where that young man is? That was the example you gave me with Kelby, who was looking for the art space that was quieter. I
think he's still at Baxter. I think he still comes. But the thing with Baxter and the thing with most of our community centers is that, you know, we've got great people doing great work, but they're understaffed, right? So we need more volunteers there. We need folks who can say, okay, I'm gonna come and do art Monday, Wednesday, and Friday down here in this space, and this kid can join me for that. Right, because if we take a staff member down there, then we're under-supervised upstairs. So it really is around how we maneuver folks around. Right. But he still comes. He still is engaged. They actually won the prize. They ended up, a donor gave us $500, so they got the $500 to go spend any way they wanted to. We were going to do it again this winter, but time got away, so we're probably going to do it again over spring break. But it's just one of those things where you can give kids the tools, think about their space. And one of the cool things that also happened is they got a new basketball floor. They got a new TV screen and a new teen room downstairs. So a lot of their ideas were then actually came to light. Because
we were over there for the
beautiful space, right?
It is beautiful, and that came out of that. That's great.
Yeah, so you know, you take a lot of their input, right, and you come back and you do some of the things you can, and they get to see it, and that empowers them to say, I do have a voice, right? People heard me, things happen, but you got to be real intentional about it and say to them, look, this took place because of your input. It might be something we were working on, but your input actually helped us really push it through and make it different.
What artist have you been exposed to in your life, or have you, that pops to mind, that really changed the way you thought about art? And it could be music or visual, whatever pops to mind.
So one of my, you know, favorite writers is Langston Hughes, right? Langston Hughes led me to the Harlem Renaissance, led me to the jazz, led me to a lot of that stuff. But Langston Hughes was like one of the first writers that I really, you know, that was at the age of like 24. I wasn't a reader, I wasn't a reader and any of that stuff like that. Finished my first book I actually finished all the way through as an adult was Malcolm X, the autobiography of Malcolm X, Alex Haley. But then that led me to, you know, looking for other stuff. But when I found Langston Hughes, led you to Darnell Harrison, led you to Paul Laurence Dunbar. I mean, just to so many different people. And, you know, one of my favorite characters is from him is the simple character that he has. This guy who just sits in the bar, drinks, and talks stuff all day long. You know, so just a real simple guy, but has such a huge impact on his community just because of his philosophy and what he thinks, right? So I think that's what it was. When you think about Langston Hughes and you think about Bob Marley, and then you just think about the hip-hop culture as a whole. You know, I got a lot of hip-hop artists that I just listen to that inspire to this day.
Who's your favorite right now?
Right now, it's Kendrick Lamar.
Okay.
Right, his right now his Good Kid, Mad City is like one of my favorite discs that I listen to at least twice a week, the whole thing through. But then also, you know, I'm a big Jay-Z fan, so I love Jay-Z. And then this new radio station that we got, this 105.1 oldie hip hop, I mean, that thing is on 20.
Date yourself a little bit.
I'm just saying it goes all the way back, and it's just real good. I'm just listening. Beastie Boys was on the other day. So I mean, it's just all of this stuff, and it just all combines together to make this. So I mean, it's that I'm not. I don't do music or any of that stuff myself, but I really enjoy a lot of it.
You talked about philosophy being involved in that with some of Langston's work and some of the characters he created. How would you describe the philosophy that's behind a lot of the work by local artists like Lance? How would you kind of merge philosophy with what you're hearing and seeing? What's some of the themes there?
I think it's it's finding self. I think it's figuring out who I am in the world, being comfortable with who I am in the world, and really wanting the world to see me. Right, it really is one of those places. When I listen to Lance and the crew, Robin and all of those folks do their work, and even the band what's the band that travels with them?
Missouri.
Yeah, when they do their thing, I mean, it's just their voices are so loud and clear that they're really saying to the world, listen to us, hear us. But it's just not them. They're saying listen to our community, listen to the folks who look like me, who I relate to. So I think they're really stepping out on a limb and saying, we're speaking on behalf of our generation, right? We're speaking on behalf of folks who are unheard, folks who are overlooked, folks who we, one of the things I know Lance tweets, out every morning just about the world that slept on me, right? Because I think we do sleep on our young people, especially our young people of color, because we don't think they're engaged. We don't think they want to be engaged. But I think they're saying to the world, we are here. We are here. We are a part of, and we are being engaged. And, it might not be the way you want us to be engaged, but we're here. Right? And I think their philosophy really is, right, we don't have one leader. We don't want one leader. We want to all be leaders in our own way. And we want to be comfortable in who we are and allow us to do that. So, it really is, for me, it's a self-identity, but when you talk about it, it's a group identity as well. Identity is a theme that we're seeing a lot with a lot of our work, whether you're talking about the city as a whole or we're in this in-between place right now. And so there's a lot of hybridization that is starting to happen, and I think a lot of these at times like this, a lot of identity issues surface again. And I think that's a really, really healthy thing to have, but it does require, like you said, intense listening. And that's not always an easy thing to do. No, because, I think a lot of times we all think we got the answer, right? Yeah. And we all want to tell you what you should do instead of listening and just letting you figure it out. One of the things also from NC3 is powerful questions, right? So my goal and role was not to give advice. It was really to ask questions about what you were talking about. There's an organization in Lawrence, Massachusetts that we work with, and their thing was your question is my question, right? So what it is, if you come to me with a question, let's go find the answer together, right? I don't have to have the answer, but you and I can work together to figure it out. So I think that plays a huge role. I just want to go back a little bit to when you were talking about this entrepreneurship versus social activism. I think you're 100% right? That open coffee that happens every Monday at iHub, I encourage a lot of people to go to that because I think there's some synergy that could happen from a social justice point of view to a entrepreneur, and I think that social entrepreneurship is not as big in Louisville as it should be. I think Elizabeth Jones, a local attorney who's working on that and pushing that, is really trying to get people to see. But I think, because they think different in those worlds could be very helpful to each other. And I think we could see a lot of stuff move a lot faster if you merge those worlds in an intentional way. Absolutely. And just created that space, right? Then it goes back to that listening, and it goes back to that figuring stuff out together, right? Because I think there's just two different mindsets. But they could work so beautifully together if we created that space. Absolutely, they can. That's a large part of our world is the merging of those two. And there's, it's an imperfect science in trying to merge two worlds, especially when they're using different language. Right. And history, had personal histories and so forth lead people to a table with a lot of stuff. All of us, suffer from that. Right. But if we can manage to set that stuff down for just a second and allow some space to open up, I think some new conversations can evolve and lead to new places. Right. And that social entrepreneurship, I think, is something that Louisville
could really carve out, again, a really special place for itself.
Absolutely.
And social entrepreneurship, the way I define it, because there's a lot of different definitions for it, and it's a definition I've thought a lot about, is that it creates a double bottom line. I mean, that means it doesn't, because the nature of philanthropy being what it is changing. We after coming through the recession that we've come through, and the world just fundamentally changed.
Absolutely.
The good news is, at the same time, there's been a lot of crowdsourcing tools. There's been a lot of very democratizing tools that have come on the scene as a result of this time that we've gone through, that allows people more than ever, I think, to really find their own funding in ways that they might never have been able to before. And that's an exciting place to be. And you couple that with this double bottom line concept, meaning that I can, as a business person, make money, and also if I'm got my intentions set right, I can also make Louisville a better place and help people. And I think those things are not incompatible, and we oftentimes seem to want to make them two very separate things. And I think how we do it is a big question still, but there's a lot of people, I think, that are interested in this question right now, and I'm seeing it more in Louisville than almost any other place in the country. And that's exciting.
It is, and I think that's one of the things. And having the mayor be a business guy, an entrepreneur, but then also understands the social justice world and all of that stuff like that. His leadership can help push that, and I think when and he's about merging folks too, right? That's why he introduced you all to lands and said, "Can y'all make this happen?" And we rode, and I mean, it's been a beautiful journey. And I think that's part of his role. He plays that well, and he really says, "Let's make Louisville the best that we can for everybody. What does that look like, and how do we do it?" I know there's a lot of folks who don't agree with everything that he does, but I think he gets a lot of stuff right? And I think he's moving on it. I think a lot of his it comes from his beliefs. He makes decisions based on his beliefs and how he moves. And I just think it's an interesting world to watch this guy maneuver in and out, and and be comfortable in his skin and who he is. And I think if we could all be comfortable in our skin and who we are, and take the good with the bad and move on.
Because there's good and bad in everything.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all got it, right?
And the question, I think, also that is something that we think constantly and nonstop about is anything we're doing, how do we sustain what we're doing? I mean, in the United States of America in 2015, it takes money to sustain any business enterprise, any social endeavor, whether it's coming from philanthropy, whether it's coming from business. And the thing that I'm really encouraged by is that this is a conversation that I think Louisville has in a very purposeful kind of way. And you look at, we work a lot with Youth Build Louisville, and I'll just use them as an example because it's one that I'm most familiar with. 35 to 40% of Youth Build's income on any given year, even as a nonprofit, comes from contracts that they have for construction or environmental services jobs that they compete for on the market. So that means even though they're a nonprofit, that they have a sustainable revenue stream. And it's that kind of thinking that I think makes Youth Build such a unique organization and has been such a good partner for us, because that sustainability question is really important also, because if you can't sustain something, you can pour a bunch of money onto something. But if it's not sustained, you could end up doing more damage than you do good. And so that's a question that I do hear very actively being talked about Louisville, and I think that's something we do very well, is putting that on the table and talking about it. And I think we're getting better at it too, even from our foundation partners in the philanthropy world. They're even thinking about it differently, right? They're having conversations. They're national level too. I mean, impact investing is the mantra these days, as well it should be. I think and you've got to get big business engaged. Louisville's got tons of business folks who've got philanthropy dollars and community dollars, and you got to really figure out, how does this all work together, right? How do you put a plan together and put it in front of folks that's not the typical, I need a grant, I need to do this, but really, this is my plan. This is how, right? It's got to be different, right? And we all got to grow and understand that, the world has changed. It's no longer about, just social good. It's also about, is it sustainable? Do you got a good business model? Is it going to be something? And what's the impact that it has, right? It can't just be,
I want to save these 2 kids. It's got to be, okay, how do you really want to do this work, and what's the real impact? And I think, having people look at data, having people report data is one of those things that we are getting better at as a city and as a community and a country. Because I think when you look at President Obama and his ideal of saying to folks, you can't work in silos no more. Just because you're at the Department of Education don't mean you don't work with the Department of Labor, and you guys, how you're going to spend your money so that we can have a bigger impact. So, I think even having somebody at the top level like that break down silos and for federal government was huge, to then say, okay, states, you got to do the same thing, and then to say, cities, you got to do the same thing. Don't put a proposal together with me. Don't send me a proposal that doesn't have a lot of people at the table, and you guys are going to work collectively and collaboratively to get this done. So, getting that from the federal level on down was huge. And I think people moved on it and had to see the world a whole lot different.
Absolutely. I mean, and you've worked with us enough to know that there's a lot of people that come to the table anytime we come to the table.
Got to.
You do, because
some stay, some don't.
Judy Jennings is one of my heroes on the local scene, and and it's an old proverb, but she always says, if you want to go fast, go by yourself, but if you want to go far, you go with others. And I think that, as Judy always is, really of the moment in anything she says.
That's it. And the only time I want to go fast is when I'm in the car, so I'm by myself most of the time. But when you're building movements and you're trying to get stuff done, you got to do. I mean, that's the long work, right? That's the long. And when you talk about sustainability, sometimes it's not just about money; it's about who's all brought into the plan and how they change their day-to-day structure and their policies and their organizations and how they move. So I think it's not just a dollars and cents, but it also is a policy thing that makes this stuff sustainable.
Absolutely,
long term. And I think Louisville's finally having the hard policy conversations. And people think policy only happens at the mayor's office and at the city council. I mean, at council, and then also at the Frankfurt. But it also happens inside your organizations. Changing policies that do little things that really have a big impact are huge, right? Mayor Fisher just created a new policy last July around allowing every Metro employee 2 hours a week to go mentor, right? So we've got 6,000 people on the roster. If we can get all 6,000 of them mentoring a young kid, that's huge, right? Our goal by the end of this year is to have 600. That's a big deal, right?
I hope Teresa Reno Weber's looking at return on investment on that.
Because, she is.
Because that's a great metric.
She is, right? So, OPI is always looking at it. HR is engaged, right? So we're consistently working across all of these levels and saying, what can we do and do it better? And then mayor goes out and asks other companies to do the same thing, right? So that's a policy that has a huge impact. That's easy to sustain, right? Because you're just allowing people 2 hours a week, right? It ain't like you are hurting anything. And it's one of those things that don't cost you as a company anything, but it actually gives the community so much more.
That's right. I mean, at 2 hours, that's a prototype, and that's with our organization, we don't intend to build this big monolith of an organization. We intend to always keep it lean and small, because we are built for speed, but our speed, to be specific about it, means we're about prototyping.
Right.
It's a responsible use of resources, the way we see it, to test something small, see if it's working, figure out what's not working about it. Is it meeting a need? Are the right people at the table? You can always replicate, you can always scale it up. But so in our prototyping, we've discovered a lot of things that seem like good ideas at the beginning. Really just, weren't that great. And a lot of things that we maybe even didn't think so much about turned out to be a really, really big potential in play. And so that prototyping and speed of testing is something that we really specialize with in our organization. And to that degree, we've got an artist getting ready to come and work with you.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about the program that Corin Shodme, who is the artist,
Absolutely.
Is going to be coming to work on?
Yeah, so he's going to come and help us out with our zone, not our zone, I'm thinking about Zones of Hope. Actually, this is our Summer Works program.
We'll get back to Zones of Hope now.
It's the mayor's summer employment program where he works with 16 to 21-year-olds, helping them get employment, where he's calling on this year to get 2,500 people employed. And what we're going to have the artists do is come in and, help us visualize the data a little bit different, right? So it tells a story that's just not numbers on a piece of paper, but it really is this piece that we can show people the impact that it has, why it matters, but then also to help us figure out, right, what's the best advertisement? What can we create to really get young people engaged and get them involved? We just hosted the showcase this Saturday. And it was cold, but we still had a good number of young people. I don't know what the final numbers were, but when I was there, it was a lot of young people coming through looking for employment.
Yeah.
So we say young people don't care, they don't want jobs. I mean, they came dressed, they came ready, they came ready to ask questions. Parents brought them in to help them do resumes. There was a computer lab there for folks to do online stuff. So this is a summer works program that the mayor's been running for the last 4 years. We started with 400, helping 400 kids get a job. To last year we had about 2,100, and this year we're shooting for 2,500. There's a report that just came out of the University of Chicago that says when you help young people find employment, your violence goes down overall. Like, not just between that age group, but overall. And it's like, okay, but they're still making sure they're going back and looking at the numbers and stuff like that. But we believe, right, that, and then you also got to understand, if I don't get my first job experience until later in life, then I'm behind the ball already, right? So we want young people to encourage that, engage in that. Mayor's always looking for companies to either take young people on or sponsor them. Costs about $2,500 for a kid to work 30 hours a week for up to 7 hours for 7 weeks. 30 hours a week, 7 weeks. $2,500 is, for some folks that's not a lot, but it's a huge investment in these young people. And if you can't take them on, we'll find a place for them in one of our nonprofit organizations in the city. We'll find a place for them to go. And our goal really is to get them embedded in a place that's going to give them a mentor. It's going to give them real work experience. We don't want folks just sitting around sweeping and stuff like that, which is a good thing. But we also want our young people to experience what all Louisville has to offer. There's so many opportunities here. There have been a lot of companies. Norton's has been a big partner. Mark's Feed Store has been a big partner. Thornton's, JCPS. They all take young people in and really encourage them to be able to do better and stuff like that. So it's interesting. So we're excited about this process to see what comes from it. But it really is looking at our data, but helping us do it in a different way. But then also helping us think about what kind of advertising pieces we could put together, not just for young people, but hopefully to encourage companies to be a part of it too.
Absolutely. And the easiest way that I would describe it to a company is if you have someone who is part of the city that your business is based in, who is working for you, and you're engaged in a conversation with them, and they represent a different generation maybe or whatever, you've just got a relationship that has been formed with a brand new part of your city that your business is serving. So, marketing firms get paid big bucks to do that kind of work. So to be able to give a young adult a job and at the same time be able to connect even at a more deeper level with the city that is building and supporting your business is an important thing for us to do.
It's huge, right? So, the mayor's going to keep pushing that. And we think we're going to get 2,500, if not more, employed this summer. So it's going to be interesting.
What we can do to help.
I appreciate that.
Do you want to talk about One Love?
Yeah, let's talk about One Love. One Love Louisville is this new campaign. I meant to bring you all T-shirts, but I forgot all about it. One Love Louisville is this new comprehensive plan that we just rolled out in January. And what it really is looking at how do we reduce violent deaths in our city, right? We're looking at homicides, suicides, and overdose. Average year, if you look between 2009 and 2013, I believe, we averaged 56 homicides a year, 86 suicides, and 121 overdose. Right, our goal is to see those numbers go down. We do not want to continue to lose that many numbers year after year after year. So this plan has 13 goals and 42 initiatives to support that, and we're really pushing that and saying to the community. So it's called One Love Louisville, be the one that makes a difference. Yeah. Everybody has a role to play. If you look on the back of it, it talks really about be the one that makes a difference. So we're saying to everybody, you got a role to play, whether that's going through a suicide prevention training that we offer a lot of, going through substance abuse training, really looking to see where kids start looking at the signs and understanding when people are using drugs, or if you're going through conflict resolution, anger management, or if you just want to be a mentor, right? That's why mentoring matters so much to us, is that we know young people who are connected to caring adults, other caring adults outside of their family and stuff like that, really have better outcomes. So we're really asking people to step up and do that. But this One Love Louisville, we had about 150 Louisvillians who helped us put this plan together. They worked and they really looked at all of the different root causes. They looked at things that they thought we could do in the long term to really make a difference and really start seeing those numbers start going down the other way. So we're really looking at that. So we're really excited about this. It just rolled out in January. We got our first big meeting with the implementation accountability team Friday. So we're going to meet with them monthly and just share numbers and data and all of that stuff so that they can look at it. And we're off to a rough start already with homicides, and we're at 16 homicides compared to 2 at this time last year. We ended the year last year with, I think, about 56. 11 of those were domestic violence homicides. So we're just looking at all of those numbers and saying, okay, what can we do differently as a community? And we want to do as much prevention and intervention as possible. So we need the community ready to help us understand what they can do to prevent it, but then also understand what intervention is and how do they play a role in intervening when they see a hostile environment or see something that's kind of troubling to them. Who do they call? Who do they get a hold of and stuff like that? So One Love Louisville, we're excited about it. It's going to be one of the things it's going to be a long-term plan. When we started this work, we understood we weren't going to change numbers overnight, that we were going to have to put a lot of work in. Our goal is just to reduce as much as possible. We would love to get to 0, but there's not too many communities that have 0 homicides, suicides. So that's a lot of work. But the goal is to get to that and push that. So it's going to be it's a interesting ride. But we think everybody got a role to play.
If somebody's interested in volunteering, supporting that, what's the best place for them to connect with to get included?
They could go to the Metro Louisville website, LouisvilleKY.gov. Look for the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods in the department area. They can call me 574-2029, 574-2029, and we'll get them plugged in and get them connected. So we're just really looking for people to go on. They can go online and download their whole report, read it, then shoot me or Quiniqua an email and saying this is where we feel like we fit in. Our emails are on there, on the website and stuff
and we'll
like that.
put all that on our website and get it out too for everyone.
So that'll be a great way. We want all ideas. We know we didn't cover, even though we got 13 goals and 42 initiatives, we still know we missed something. We know there's other innovative ideas. We just want people to be at the table, be engaged, and figure out where they fit in.
Right. Who are 1 or 2 people that you want all of Louisville to know about that they may not know about?
Wow. I got a list. But I only get to do 1 or 2. Let me see who are my go-to folks, right? Dallas Thornton is somebody who I think a lot of people in Louisville know, but a lot of people in Louisville don't know. Dallas is a career planner over at the Kentucky Youth Career Center. Dallas is an ex-Globetrotter. He played professional ball all over the country, all over the world, as a matter of fact. But he's one of those cats who is consistent and always making sure that, I'm okay and that I'm doing the work that I need to do, but he also holds me accountable, right? There's some folks who just hold you accountable.
For all of
right,
us, right?
Who say, Anthony, you're doing good, but you can do better on this. And I also think, just to keep it with my elders, I would add my mom, but she don't want me. I'm put all her information out. But Tom Moffitt, who's an older social entrepreneur, white guy, who, celebrates when we're doing well, but also holds us accountable too, right? So I think, if you think about those two for me, Dallas is older African-American, and then Tom is older white guy who are still committed to the work, who are still in the struggle, who are still saying we can do better, but also are not sitting back doing just saying we can do better. They're also in the trenches making sure we're doing better. Because Dallas is still working with young people every day. Right, and I don't even think people understand who he is and the celebrity that he is. If you go outside of Louisville, right? So I think that's one of the things people forget, that Louisville has all of these folks who have done all of this great stuff across the world, but now they're here, and I don't think we celebrate them enough. So I would think about Dallas Thornton and then Tom Moffitt.
Thanks for sharing that with us.
No problem. Thank you.
Last thing I'll ask you about is, as you know, the Roots and Wings project, which is a project that has a lot of people at the table pulling forward, from the Kentucky Center for African American Heritage, who's the lead on it. The Kentucky Center for Performing Arts is participating. Lance, Hannah, Robin, Missouri. I mean, Brandon Shatter. You got a lot of the slam poetry scene involved in that. And Bridge Kids International, Stacey Bailey and Jai doing amazing work in the city of Louisville. So you were there when Art Place America did site visit, and for those who may not know, this grant would infuse $283,000 into the creative economy of primarily west Louisville, in the hands of these young artists to form the groundwork for creating a new African American theater company that would be run by and for the young adults in the city of Louisville. Even if the grant doesn't happen, and we hope it will. You were there when the site visit happened. I'd like to get your feedback on what you experienced at the site visit, because I know you had your camera out taking a lot of pictures. And then, but more importantly, even if the grant didn't happen, what is the importance of this type of work to the city of Louisville?
So one, I thought the site visit went well. I was very blown away. I'm always blown away when I watch the young people perform. But I think their use of space and that whole community center, when we walked in, Shawnee Arts and Culture Place, when we walked in the door and they used that whole room, so I just think, they're very creative and they're thinking about stuff and they really want to make an impact. And one, also, right, to create a space where they get to talk about their work, because you can see it on all of their faces, how excited they were, how impassioned they were, and how this is just
and
who they are.
How smart they were with what
very
they were
smart.
saying.
Yeah, very smart and engaged, but it really is about, this is ours, right? They own it. They know it. They want the recognition, but they're going to do this with or without the recognition. But I think, when you talk about how important it is to us for, one of the things I've been really looking at, when you think about the Lance Newmans of the world, the Ramen, the Tatiana, the writer, all of those young folks who are doing all of this work, I try not to tap into their resources and their skills without figuring out a way to get them paid, right?
That's right.
So it's
that's
always,
exactly right.
So I think that's the importance of it, right? You've got all of these folks who can change the world with their skills, but we got to make sure that they're getting paid for what they do, right? So how do we do that? So one of the things, if this grant doesn't come through, we've got to figure out a way to support them, right? We got to figure out a way to support the work that they do that change the world, so that they don't have to have these third shift jobs that they go to. They don't have to have all this other stuff. We've got to figure out as a community how to allow them to make a living off of their art form, which is one of the things I think, you all are helping push, other people are helping push, but we've got to figure out how we do that better, because their art form is needed, because they just don't do poetry and music. They actually go into schools, they go into community centers, and they teach young people how to find their voices.
Yes. Right,
which is huge, right? So we've got to figure out as a community how important that is to us. And then we've got to put a price tag on it, and then we got to figure out how to raise the funds for it. So for me, their thing is so much bigger than just their performance. It's also what they do in community, and how they do it in community, and how we support it.
And they have, taken over the course of the last year that I've been working closely with that group. They have taken so much of their own personal time in life to figure out how to organize themselves.
Absolutely.
To benefit the community. And that is something, I'd say they probably got well over 1,000 hours just in meeting times, just figuring out what they can do to help others. And we want to encourage that in the city of Louisville.
That's part of it, right? You got to do that part too.
Yeah.
To get to the point where you get paid for what you do, right? So we all got to put some skin in the game. But we can figure it out a little bit quicker for them because they are committed, and we all, as a community, use their resources, right? There's not a time when I can't call Lance and say, I need you to come and do something for me that you don't do it. There's not a time when I can't call Louisville and say, I need some help with something. Right. Can you do it for me, right? So they all are ready, like you said, and they show up, they come out, and they come out being who they are, but they also are pushing us to think differently. They're also pushing us to say, our young folks, Black Lives Matter, these young people's voices matter, all of those things. So they're trying to figure out this whole how to be authentically who they are, but then also how do we engage in a world that sometimes isn't for us, that don't want us at the table. And I think having partners and supporters like, Ideals, and then also the mayor's office really, really helps them feel more and more comfortable, because I'm not asking you to change who you are. I'm just saying come to the table. There's some things that you can do better, because we all can. But I don't want Lance to be no different than who Lance is.
That's right.
I just want you to show up and be what you need to do, right? So it's like, let me create a space where people are allowing you to be who you are as you grow to be who you're really going to be, right? So I think that's important.
And as a creative chamber of commerce, that's what we do, is we try to identify those resources. And for those who are putting in the work,
right?
And you got to be putting in the work. for those who put in the work and doing it consistently,
right.
We try as much as we can to help find the resources to make sure they get paid.
Absolutely.
Because at that point, it's more than just being a creative person.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually trying to move the dial on
Absolutely.
what makes our city hum.
Right.
So you're doing great work on that.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you
appreciate
for being here today.
Thank you. Oh, this was good. Yeah.
Good. Glad you enjoyed it. And thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next week at Who's Louisville. And if you're out and about, which is a question this week with the blizzard and the 7-degree temperatures we got, on Friday night here at Zephyr Gallery, an amazing event is coming up. Lance and the Roots and Wings group that we've been talking about will be doing an entire evening of poetry with improv music provided by Amped, and the whole evening inspired by the work of James Baldwin, to go back to some of the Harlem Renaissance folks you were talking about earlier. So we hope you will join us, and thank you, and we'll see you next time.